You're trying to hold that smile. All right, we are live. You can hold the smile as long as you want, Reverend Mike. And we're here with Salaam Thompson and myself, Malayna on Inauguration Day here in America. And we have some thoughts on talks, which I guess we could include the inaugural speech and the poem. Those are talks. We could talk about them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and off the air, Salaam, you were talking about he was one of the Capitol Police that you were talking about.
Yes, it was a viral Twitter video that went out at the early onset of the insurrection of the Capitol, and he was engaging with the guy who was in front of him. I think that guy who he was engaging with was one of the suspects who they arrested, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But he ended up getting into a contentious, confrontation. Then he bolted up the stairs, leading the crowd away from where the folks in the chamber were, and allowed them to get to safety. But I was just saying before we went on the air that it was good to see the brother get his flowers while he was still on the job, while he's still here, and nationally, an elevated visibility on the elevated stage, such as the inauguration.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing here is that you see this convergence of civil service, this convergence of government, this convergence of entertainment, this convergence of unsung hero and heroine ship that all like come from this 5-lane 405 freeway into a 1-lane single track, a dirt road, so to speak.
That unity that was mentioned so many times.
Yeah, so I mean that was a snapshot of it, and it shows what is possible when, and what a sign could look like if we just sustain the energy going forward. Yeah, like I mentioned before, I just don't want us to say, mission accomplished.
Right.
Yeah, baby, we made it. Mama, we did it. That kind of thing. And really be vigilant, because I remind those who are watching. 3 days after Obama was inaugurated the first time, in a hotel somewhere, I believe in Washington, the Tea Party was born. So they started their work right then. 3 days post inauguration. So, and I think the country was so elated to see this black man in a high office for the first time.
We
And
weren't on the
then
lookout.
we weren't on the lookout for what was to come. So we had church folks who remixed "We Shall Overcome" to "We Have Overcome," and quite prematurely, as you saw how the 12 years has played out since he was first inaugurated. So,
Yeah.
and then,
well, in a sense, there was an overcoming that was it should have been celebrated and needed to be marked.
It needed to be marked as a first,
as a step,
as a milestone, as a little small milestone. It's major, and when you look back at it in hindsight, and with respect to things that subsequently happened, it was still small. But then what that created, and the ensuing mobilization of the Tea Party, is that every time we look throughout history, up until including that point, each time when we saw a period of jubilation, of black jubilation, I should say, there was a period that was attached to his hip that was white supremacist mobilization. There was always a white supremacist mobilizing antidote to that black jubilation. And so when you saw, and going back to Reconstruction,
Mm-hmm.
Where after slavery ended, the 12 years of Reconstruction, black folks were riding high. We had many Congress people, many of them were Republican, I might add, if interestingly enough, because I know we don't think highly of Republicans today of what the party has become, but back in those times, many of them are great, scholars were Republican, Frederick Douglass being one,
Yeah.
so they were appointed to offices. So you had that 12 years of brief jubilation in Camelot, I dare to borrow a phrase from JFK era. But then
Mm-hmm.
right after that, you had the Great Compromise. Then you
Mm-hmm.
had the establishment of Jim Crow and the birth of the Ku Klux Klan. So then you
Yeah.
lead on to we're celebrating desegregation of the military, and then but next thing you know, that desegregation came attached to it.
They're like a series of actions and responses.
And
Maybe not,
responses.
maybe more reactions than responses.
Precisely, and precisely.
Yeah.
So while we're celebrating, thinking we scored the go-ahead touchdown, here comes white supremacy preparing a 2-minute drill that we're not prepared for. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So
So
they're
that's where the what you asked me about before we went on the air, the people's inauguration. That's
hmm
actually tomorrow, and it's a Van Jones led grassroots effort. And you can anybody watching and all of us can go to thepeoplesinauguration.org. And let me see, I can read you a little bit about what it says. We need healing, justice, and renewal. Let's create a moral vision for the America we could be. And it has there's several speakers, and you can sign up. You might as well sign up today, and
hmm
you'll get emails and all of that, and hopefully a recording. But I love the idea of it follows what you were saying of where our work is not done.
Yes.
It's just the beginning of the healing and the stepping forward. And while we celebrate all the firsts that we saw in the
hmm
inauguration today, we also know that there's plenty of work to be done, and it will. What is it? Many hands make light work.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, if we do it all together.
Y-
Uh,
y- Yes, and I mean, I just hope that I'm going to let Mr. Biden and Kamala, brief for a minute. This is a moment. This is their day,
yeah.
So and then they have a lot of their work cut out for them. If you see this, 17 executive orders he had to sign to reverse, some ills. I mean, with a stroke of a pen, he fixes things like that. And I know that there are black folks who are saying, well, see, we haven't had day one solutions. And once upon a time, I did think that. But then after thinking about it, I said, well, our issues are more complex and layered and nuanced that a stroke of a pen is not going to fix it. You
Yeah.
can't half-ass your way to justice, right?
Mm-mm.
So it probably will take some time to solve that problem. So to get these quick fixes out of the way, and then, okay, let's see how we can best solve the issue. Still have a critical eye. I mean, but it's the same thing that um, Franklin Delano Roosevelt told A. Philip Randolph when A. Philip Randolph sat across the table from him. He said, "Well, okay, I hear what you're saying, Franklin Delano Roosevelt to A. Philip Randolph." But then
Mm-hmm.
he leaned over to him for what historical accounts have said and said, "Now make me do it." Okay, end quote. So basically, you had to push them. So just as A. Philip Randolph had to push FDR, Martin
Mm-hmm.
Luther King and Ralph Abernathy and Whitney Young, and they had to push Lyndon B. Baines Johnson, to do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't push Obama. I felt some of us who did got our hands slapped. A lot of it by our own. Saying, no, let the brother in there. He's doing his work. Can't we just don't his wife look so pretty? I mean, no, this black girl magic. Okay, well, we get all of that. But when we tried to push him, and just like as he pushed our community for votes, um,
Mm-hmm.
and we were slapped down, so he had that community infighting with us. So it created this vacuum. And that
Mm-hmm.
vacuum where we didn't, is the biblical saying is that you want not because you ask not. That vacuum created that space for that to exist, and it created the atmosphere for Trump to come along. So it disconnected the continuity of what I felt deep in the recesses of Obama's heart that he wanted to bring about, but that breaks that chain. And so what I hope that Biden and Kamala can do this time around is make their sustained change, not just for the 4 or the 8 years they're in there, but make it sustain over 15, 20 years, to where like you pulling up at a train station, the bars come down, and then long Union Pacific Railroad cars coming there, and you just gotta wait. And that Union Pacific rail car coming in is them making succession plans for every personnel, for every legislation that they pass. So you have a block of time where you can truly reverse course for the country and truly be a benchmark to launch into something greater than we've ever imagined.
Yeah. Yes, Reverend Mike.
So I just wanted to, because I've been looking forward to our talk today, because I just want to back up in the timeline, given that we just had Dr. King's holiday on Monday and his birthday on Friday.
Can you move closer to your brand new microphone, please, sir?
So that what I spent the day was listening to MLK speeches. And then I found on, I think it was on Netflix, King in Chicago.
Yes.
So you've seen this film, Salaam?
I haven't seen the film, but I know the story.
So
yes.
Anyway, I think you would, because you could relate to so many of the neighborhoods, but they were talking about so here you have, so what I came away with about Dr. King was a couple things. One, I really do think he was kind of a modern day prophet, even though just like everybody else, he had his weaknesses.
Sure.
But when you listen to his speeches today, and you realize that there was this really a vision cast for what America could be from a man who was not only African American, but had a lot of education, right, out of PhD out of Boston College, who had thought deeply on things, was influenced by Hindu philosophy and the ideas of nonviolence as the way Gandhi practiced it. The challenges that he himself had with it, and how far he had to go within his own work so that to stay the course, because he knew that the only way that it was going to work is as a mirror of the hate, really, the hate that was being shown on them. And of course, they had these victories, really, in with the bus boycott and of course Selma and the Civil Rights Act. But then when he started to move north, and they picked Chicago, and they picked Chicago on purpose.
Yes.
And because it was one of the most heavily segregated, in a way that appeared to be populated with moderate whites.
Yes.
Right. And as soon as they started marching in their neighborhoods, they came completely unglued.
Marquette Park. Yeah, I drove the kids through there. Yes.
So you had.
They were no longer moderate.
Well, what they did was they talked about how Daley managed to hold together this coalition of Irish, Poles, Italians, Lithuanians, and I noticed that myself. driving around the city. The only time I've been there, but you could tell the patron saint of the local Catholic churches. You could tell what neighborhood
that you were in.
you're
Yes.
in.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Cleveland is set up the same way. So I presume that whole belt. But my point being that Dr. King came to see how much bigger a job
He had, yeah.
that this was going to be. And
Yeah.
and so here we are, where very clearly, and I know Republicans hate this, but if you don't show white supremacists the door, and then they're front and center representing your party as they bust through the Capitol, it's just naked, bigoted white supremacy. And the more voices stay silent about that, the more complicit we all are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it is a huge, to your point, Salaam, it's a really is kind of a gigantic mess. So in that we have made real strides. I think everyone would agree with that. And there is, even within the Black community, you have your John Warders and others who don't want to see the conversation within the community descend into a victimization kind of thing, where the Black community has to be saved by white folk.
Yeah.
Right. So it just seems so complex. And the only, I just, listening to all of these talks and Dr. King's approach, it really does have to be kind of a spiritual renewal.
Yes.
Because on the political plane, things are just so harsh. It's just harsh. So, of course, not all Republicans are racist. Of course, they aren't.
Right.
And like Dr. King wrote all those years ago in the Montgomery jail, and I think you've even alluded to this too, Salaam, that the greatest enemy of real social justice when it comes to race in the country is the white moderate who does not speak up. And of course, that has changed somewhat through the Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
But now, finally, it's a shame that Trump did what he did, but it just clearly illustrated the man that he was before he even ran.
Yeah.
And so we have 74 million people
who still support him,
and believe the election was stolen.
Yeah.
And and they're basing that belief on a concerted misinformation.
Propaganda.
Well, it's been a misinformation campaign that started 5 years ago, because remember, he started talking about the system being rigged when he ran against Hillary.
Absolutely.
And so it was a cynical strategy that was meant to be an insurance policy just in case, and then the whole thing blew up.
Yeah.
So the other movie I watched, and I didn't get a chance to listen to your Facebook post, and that was One Night in Miami.
Yes.
And that had all of my Jim Brown, right? So my childhood heroes, of course, Malcolm X, as a little white boy in Ohio, I was terrified of Malcolm X.
Really?
He doesn't even have
Yeah,
a real last name. His last name is
it
X.
was X. Yes.
Right? And he was kind of sold that way, right? And then Ali came out as a Muslim, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that stuff, and just
And Sam Cooke is the last of the
Sam
four.
Cooke is the other one. Yes.
Sam Cooke,
right?
who was kind of he was kind of speaking for for all the establishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I was curious to see what your take on that, because Malcolm, I thought, was presented as a much gentler fellow than I've always imagined him to be.
Yeah, they portrayed him to be weak, and in my humble opinion, and
I didn't know that he didn't seem. I mean, he was forceful, but
he was, but in a lot of ways, like, well, not only just him, but I felt that and this is no knock against Regina King at all. Okay, Regina King, fine actress, fine filmmaker now, but I just have to call this as I see it, and I'll just say it here for in case those who didn't get to watch my live when I went. But I noticed, well, one thing that I noticed is it wasn't even with 5 minutes into the film, and when Malcolm came home, and the sister Betty was sitting down in the chair waiting on to walk in, and she goes, "Well, we were waiting for you. Did you get to talk to him?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, "Who?" And then it came out that, okay, did you talk to Lewis X? And then Lewis X, which of course at that time was formerly Lewis Walcott, who became Lewis X when he joined the Nation of Islam in 1955. And actually, he followed the footsteps of his wife, who was also formerly known as Betsy Ross, and became Mother Khadijah. And so it eventually became Minister Farrakhan. But I noticed how within 5 minutes of the film, they name dropped him, but they didn't have a character representation. And when they showed the brief naming ceremony for Muhammad Ali, they showed a fella who was sitting in the front row who resembled a younger version of Minister Farrakhan, but they never identified him. He didn't have any lines. Nothing was ever said, and it made me think. Okay, if you it started to, like, to me, based on what I saw, it looked like it was aimed at taking bricks from the foundation that the Nation of Islam has built for well over the past 90 years, and it's a program that's still standing, that's still reformative for Black men and women, boys and girls, ever since Master Farad Muhammad appeared to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was formerly known as Elijah Poole. But they didn't go deep into any of the stories, or you didn't see not one redeeming quality about the Nation of Islam came forth in the film. They even alluded to, it was one line in there where one of them said they likened it like to a gang, and then one of them said, "Well, what's the difference?" And then when they were sitting in the hotel, and between Jim Brown was talking to Ali and Sam was talking to him, they tried to frame the whole story as if Malcolm had pulled one over on Muhammad Ali and hustled him into the nation. That's the way they made it seem like it wasn't
Okay.
anything that was itching his soul. Because if you read, I have Muhammad Ali's book right here, where if you read his account and looked at the movie the movie Ali, that what's
Will
the
Smith?
fellow? Yes, and I forgot the man. What's the producer's name? Man, he did Miami Vice of the '80s as
Michael
well.
Mann?
Michael Mann. And so, like, he did Ali as well. He did Miami Vice in the '80s too. But when he started off his version of Ali film, it showed a young Ali getting on a bus in Louisville, Kentucky, and he saw a cover of a newspaper that had Emmett Till's mutilated face on there. That was an introductory and tapped the spirit of Muhammad Ali at that point. Then when he went and won his gold medal in Rome in 1960, and he came back and wearing his medal all proud, he talks about this in several interviews where he couldn't even go downtown in his hometown of Louisville and order a hamburger and a soda pop. And they said, we don't serve niggas here. And so he in
Right.
turn took that gold medal. It didn't mean shit to him. He took it and threw it in the Ohio River. He said, to hell with it. And then it wasn't until I want to say 2004-ish or something like that where they gave him a replica of that medal, so to kind of like make amends kind of deal. But throughout, and I just keep it brief, but in the end of the movie, generally when you tell a movie and you have a centered around four central characters, you will have a summation of points or outcomes for the same core that you started the movie with. There was only a summation of Malcolm X. And the movie ended with a brilliant quote from him about martyrdom in December of 1964. And then it said, and he was assassinated 2 months later. Well, what else happened in December of 1964? Sam Cooke was murdered in December of 1964. Not one word was said about that. And then there's another Netflix film that I will watch called The Two Murders of Sam Cooke, where because I knew of one account that was reported where he picked up a girl at a bar, and then it took her to the hotel instead of taking her home, and he intended to to do his thing with her, and she wasn't having it, so she took her clothes and got out of the room, and he went and confronted the motel manager. The motel manager pulled a gun and shot him. That was a story that was often repeated. But there is another side of it where folks who were in music at that time didn't like the fact that a black man owned not only his own music but his own masters, which was huge at that time. And so I was a little light on that story, so I wanted to look at that film and base my judgment on that as to which one to go, because I have yet to find any FBI files on Sam Cooke, even though he kept company with two men who had dossiers from here to Timbuktu, and Malcolm and Martin. So how is it that you're in, and I have access to Chicago Sun-Times. They did a whole expose like a couple of years ago where I saw every Muhammad Ali file. I saw every Elijah Muhammad file. They started keeping record of Elijah Muhammad's files in January 3rd of 1957. And so that's a whole lot of information to leave out to truly tell a story about Muhammad's heart of hearts and why he wanted to join the nation. And it also omitted the fact that Malcolm X actually had sent a contrite letter to Elijah Muhammad as a means of extending an olive branch and an apology in a nutshell, and wanted to come back to the nation. And Elijah Muhammad had told Malcolm, okay, son, go put out the fires that you started. And who knows that Sunday at Audubon Ballroom, February 21st, 1965, could have been that first day where he was going to apply the aqueous film foaming fluid onto that flame that he started. And that ended up being his murder. But they didn't say any details about William Bradley. They didn't say any details about his security man, John Ali. I mean, when Jim Brown in the film had approached to the FOI guy said like, oh, like, nigga, I wish you would. And then the FOI guy was like, that, like, that's not FOI. You wouldn't even approached him. I mean, because that's one of their ministers. If they're there to protect him, they will break your legs. Okay, they don't care about nothing. They don't need weapons. These guys are putting knots on police heads. Okay, so like, I thought personally Jim Brown would have got his ass beat if we're gonna tell the story right. But these guys they're from the streets, they know martial arts and all that kind of stuff. But it did say at the beginning it was fabrication. But unfortunately, we live in a society where we have Google brains, and we look at a movie and think that what we saw in a movie was depicted as fact, and we take it and run with it. And the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, he takes, some arrows, to the heart and things like that. So I just felt that it misrepresented him and the organization, and didn't even omitted its great deeds that is done for folks like myself, who
Right.
who
Yeah.
actually needed it. So, yes.
What I heard kind of echoed a few times is
Hmm.
in as you were telling that, is the act of storytelling automatically
Hmm.
omits things. And the hope is that seeing a movie like One Night in Miami might stir people's curiosity to look deeper. That's the hope I have when anybody sees any historical film, is that it whets your appetite to learn more about the characters and the background and everything.
Hmm.
But all stories, even the Bible,
Yep.
even, all stories are told with a perspective in mind. And so you can't always include every perspective or everything.
Every
You have
detail.
to
Yeah.
tell there's an arc of a story, and there's a through line that has to follow, and there's usually an intention of why a storyteller is telling that story. So
Hmm.
I haven't looked into was it a book that got made into a movie? Do you know?
It was a play. It
Okay.
started out as a theatrical play, and then
Okay.
it was made into a movie. And like I said, I
Mhm.
enjoyed the dialogue between the
Mm.
four of them, because they were
Okay.
pretty tight, all four of them. But when
Mhm.
I look at the overarching uh, end game, I
Mm.
say, something's not,
Right.
up to snuff. And I understand, like, there's a element of hyperbole, there's an
Mhm.
element of prose, there's an element of onomatopoeia, if you
Mhm.
will, that comes
Mhm.
in storytelling,
Mhm.
but there were certain parts that I felt that they were conveniently kind of left out. You know what I mean? You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Like, why did
Yeah.
we out of four core characters did we only hear the end result of one, and then there's one of the other guys is the only one that's still alive out of the four, and
Mhm.
we didn't see any kind of tie-in to all
Right.
that, and so that led me to believe that it's kind of slanted. And another key thing, if we must
Mhm.
remember about this film, 2 years ago, Amazon banned Minister Farrakhan's literary works on its
Mm.
shopping site. Okay,
Mm.
so I find it interesting that you're telling the story, the theatrical and cinematic story of a man, through someone else's eyes, whose literary works that you ban from your website. So that's that.
The
I find that.
Netflix film, are Netflix and Amazon connected corporate at the
I'm
corporate
not
level?
sure. If I had
Okay.
to, my first guess is no, but
Mhm.
Amazon is pretty huge,
Yes.
and but the movie was released explicitly through Amazon Prime,
Oh,
and
it
so
was. Okay. I thought it
yeah,
was a
so
Netflix thing, but
but it
you're
was
right. I've seen
yeah,
it
but
on Amazon.
Amazon
Right.
banned Minister Farrakhan's books and literary works
Gotcha.
from its site.
Hmm.
So if you're in the business of banning literary works from your site, but yet we're going to allow one of another bright black artist and shine her skill sets on a
Mhm.
director's lens and
Mhm.
tell your story while banning yours, that's a red flag to me. You know.
Yeah, and it would seem like that the same intention might
Hmm.
be behind both, that you only tell part of a story
You only
intentionally.
do right, because there's truth, and then
Mhm.
there's a perception of truth. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
And we're humans, so we
yes,
can only perceive so much. We never really get the full truth, as hard as we might try.
right.
Well, and Farrakhan's story is way too complicated anyway,
Hmm.
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
he has publicly stated very anti-Semitic positions over
Mhm.
years.
Mm.
So that may have softened in the last 10 years. I don't know. But, he's on the record for that kind of talk.
Well,
And
for
so
what they
then you'd have
said
to,
was that yes,
yeah, you would have
Mm.
to, I'm just talking about from a
yes.
movie perspective. You'd have to unpack all of that. He kind of needs his own movie.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get that from
You
him.
know?
He did release. There was a documentary that he released where he was playing because he's an accomplished violinist and he has been for years. Yeah,
Mm.
since
I
the
did not
50s.
know that.
I did
Absolutely.
not
So
either.
yeah, so he can play the concerto and Chopin and then all of those classical literary works of that age of enlightenment. Um, so I'm sure there's something on YouTube, but he's very well accomplished, in that regard. So he's been playing the violin since he was a youngster. Yeah.
Mm.
So.
Well,
Wow.
and just to your point of the bodyguards being badasses, I just know that for myself. Uh, there's no way I'm going to mess with Inspector Broyles from Fringe if he's the
Mhm.
bodyguard. Whoever that actor is. Did you guys see Fringe?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it though.
Mhm.
I
Remember
know
the
you guys were
inspector?
watching it recently.
Yeah, it was good to see him in the film, and now he's playing kind of a badass kind of, which he's good at those roles because he knows how to bring that controlled strength kind of thing.
Okay.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Interesting.
just giving a shout out for the IDMB,
IMDb,
IMDb.
whatever.
Internet Movie Database.
Mhm.
Here, I can look up uh, One Night in
What did you
Miami.
think about? Uh, what did you think about the scene with Malcolm and Sam?
Mhm.
Right, so they were arguing pretty much through the night because Sam
Yeah.
wanted to drink and all they had was ice cream or whatever,
Yes.
and he wanted to go have a party.
Mhm. He's a
Uh,
where's the women at?
right, and
Yes.
but then there's this moment where Malcolm says, "Well, Sam, I have actually been to and seen you."
Mhm.
And right, and he's like, "Oh, get out of here." He goes, "What?
Right.
No, actually, I've seen you 5 times."
Yes.
Right, and so I don't know if of course, all of this is dramatized and so forth, but it was such a powerful scene of friendship,
Mhm.
of male friendship,
Yes.
and the vulnerability of a friend saying, having a vision for his friend that is so much greater than
That's the guy, right?
that looks like him. I've never
Yeah.
seen him smile though.
The actor's name is Lance Reddick.
Yeah.
Yes. And also is that we're looking at this like for instance, I'm 45.
Hmm.
So it's quite easy for me to superimpose the 45-year-old mind of Salam
Right.
onto the 23-year-old
I know.
Cassius Clay, or
Yeah.
and onto Jim Brown that was barely 30. I mean, he retired from the NFL when he was young.
Yeah.
Malcolm was 38 at the time. He was 39 when he was killed. So like looking at like, these young men at
Yeah.
that point in time where their whole world was in the fishbowl, for everybody to see was pretty pointed. But the scene that gut punched me was Jim Brown in Georgia when he was driving the
Oh
rural
my
road.
God. Yes.
And then he pulled up to a friend, and I thought this guy. It wasn't clear to me who he was. I thought he was he an old coach? Was he like a mentor or something? And so the granddaughter answered and said, "Oh, it's Jim Brown." She knew who he was, and so here, come have a seat on that outdoor porch area.
Right.
And so I'll go get my grandpa or whatever. Grandpa comes out. He offers him lemonade. He declines it. They talk and reminisce and say, "I'm proud of you, boy." Then she comes and asks him, "Can you move this furniture?" Ask the grandfather, "Can you move this furniture?" Jim Brown offers service.
Yes.
Okay. And we just had a day of service, for MLK. Just kind of putting that in perspective. He offered service, and then only for this friend, this white moderate, because he's conversing, breaking bread with Jim Brown because of who he is or who he's became. And he said, "Nah, Jim, we don't allow niggas in the house." And it was like, damn, you
And
know,
was completely,
mm,
it was just matter of fact.
he didn't bat an eye at all. And
Uh-uh.
then he proceeded to, you know, pat his chest and pound his pectoral muscle and said, "But go get him, Tiger. So basically, go ahead and entertain me. Go ahead and score your touchdowns, but I can't allow you in my home." You
Yeah.
know, and so that was a gut punch right there. It really showed
Yeah.
you that veiled line between the conversation and interaction with white and to the point of refusal to let you further into their world. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. No, you're right. And that was early in the film.
mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it definitely, I plan to watch it, and I know it's a screener that's being sent out to industry professionals to vote
Yeah.
on it for the Oscars. So
Mhm.
hopefully everybody will watch it if they don't have Amazon Prime and they get the screener. And it I mean, it is a point of us learning more, even if it doesn't give a full story. Now that people who have watched this will know that there's more to the story, thanks to Salaam, and they can do some more research.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it is also um, so great for me to see that it was directed by a woman who is an African American woman,
Mhm.
and so that's all good. It may not
Absolutely.
be a sign of a solution, like we were saying before, but it is steps forward, onward, upward, where there are opportunities that are being taken and opportunities being given by.
So along this same line, it's
Mhm.
different, but sort of the same.
Mhm.
Because tell me if I'm seeing this right or if I'm just an incredibly cynical shite. So Black Lives Matter happens over the summer, and then we slowly start to see the corporatization.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
we can sell product here.
Just like say no to drugs.
I
So
think it's a combination
so
of,
to
Just like
where
mothers
now,
against drunk driving.
have you noticed how many
yeah.
people of color are now selling cars and medicine and mixed race families
Mhm.
and
On advertising, yeah.
I was
Also, our music
I was
too.
wondering how that hits you, Salam. Do you feel
It,
like
it,
that's pandering or
yes, because I will say that if you would have told me 30 years ago that I would hear Mary J. Blige on a Target commercial,
yeah,
yeah, I would say you're a liar. If you would have told me that I would hear Smokey Robinson, cruising, on a commercial,
right.
I
Mhm.
would say you're a liar. If you would have told me that, like I mentioned before, that one of my favorite DJs ever, DJ Premier, I'll let you all YouTube him, Google him, but a fabulous classic hip hop artist, that we would hear a track from him promoted by Sony, Sony PlayStation 5,
Mhm.
back in the golden age of hip hop where DJ Premier was in his prime. I would say that's a lie.
Wouldn't
I
you
would.
also say what's a PlayStation though? Was it before
True,
PlayStation?
true, yes. It's like back in that time, it's like Nintendo and Super
Yeah,
Nintendo.
yeah. Uh-huh.
But it seemed like you see this change, this shift. Yeah,
Right.
right. And it's just fascinating. I mean, like, I won't knee jerk and say and call it pandering, but
Mhm.
it does make you say, "Damn, like what happened?" I mean, like, I guess when um, the flame fizzles out on an artist's career, and then all of a sudden it's revived in the field of advertisement. I just hope they're getting a check for it. That's all. That's
Yeah.
all I hope for.
Right.
Get them their royalty checks, and we're okay. You know.
I'll tell you what, though, marketers will look at anything and see
Hmm.
how many people respond to it, and that's what they're going to jump on. So when
Yeah.
they see people in droves out on the streets defying a pandemic to march, they'll say, this is something people can believe in. I
Hmm.
can make use of that information.
Yeah.
Right.
And it can come from a place of, this is what people want, let's be the company that gives it to them. It could come from a good place, or it could
Hmm.
come from a place of, like those Kleenex commercials that always make you cry because they're selling tissues.
Yeah.
Like, we know people will respond to this, let's pull on those heartstrings
Right.
and have them
Well,
come to
I,
us.
I
So
do think it's a good thing, right? So
yeah.
It
because
is.
10 years, 10 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So hopefully this is part of the way that there's an integration going on within uh, our this peculiar American system that we has to be dismantled
Mm-hmm.
spiritually, financially, physically, and of course it all starts at you know also injustice as far as police reform and so forth.
It's a
So
systemic metamorphosis. I
yeah,
mean, if when you like, like I'm an avid ESPN watcher. I just full disclosure, Malayna, you probably know that, but Rev knows. But once upon a time, ESPN, whose parent company is Disney,
Mm-hmm.
used to have one of the sportscasters, the late great Stuart Scott.
yeah,
And
sure,
Stuart Scott, in the I say the mid '90s was his heyday. He
right,
brought a urban flavor, urban swag to his sports recording. He brought like he'll say things like when a basketball player blocks a shot of his opponent, he'll say, "Don't bring that Kool-Aid to a gym party." And only we know like what that means, in our hood, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
was chided for that by his white counterparts, at the station,
sure,
who basically were buttoned up and this, that, and the other.
right,
But now I look at Jalen Rose. Okay, he is. I don't know if you follow the story. I'll just briefly say, but when he played in college, he was part of the Fab Five, and these were five freshmen. On the University of Michigan basketball team. There's an ESPN 30 for 30 that came out a few years back, about 4 or 5 years ago, that talks about that. Watch that documentary, 30 for 30, the Fab Five, and Jalen Rose is prominently, there. But he has a show on ESPN. He started out on Cold Pizza, and now he has Jalen and Jacoby, where he has like references to Wu-Tang Clan, references to all these references to hip hop. Because he's a hip hop, aficionado. And if you look at the background where he's sitting, you see Anita Baker album covers, you see Wu Tang album covers, you see Marvin Gaye. I mean, you see the Temptations. He's from Detroit, and he reps it well, just like I rep Chicago. And it's just so fascinating to see him on ESPN even utter the word of reparations. And I thought to myself, it was just 4 short years ago where they slapped the wrist of Jemele Hill when she was on Sports Center hosting the 6 o'clock Eastern Time edition of Sports Center, which is the prime time slot for them. And
right,
they took her off the air said that Trump basically supports white supremacy, and now is fashionable to do. And
right,
the song that I was listening to before he came on the air, "Follow the Leader," Eric B. and Rakim's had a line that said, "I can take a phrase that's rarely heard, flip it. Now it's the daily word. Now it's cool to say white supremacy on air and
right,
truly mean it in your disdain of it, and your denouncing of it." Once
Mm-hmm.
upon a time, if you dared to say white supremacy, it wasn't even that long ago. We're talking
Yeah.
less than 4 years. Of that was folks were getting hit in their pockets. Folks were losing endorsements. Cancel culture was happening before it became a hot item to cancel people. And
Mm-hmm.
so it took people losing their lives like a George Floyd, like an Ahmaud Arbery, like a Breonna Taylor, for all of a sudden say, hey, wait a minute now, we've been doing this thing all wrong. And so I would like to see a restoration to all those folks who paved the way when it wasn't hot, to
Mm.
do what is now the seasonal and cup of tea type of thing to do. Now like it's a social extracurricular activity today, but it was unpopular just a short time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So that said, I think that with hopefully with this administration, that a presidential medal or award of honor will be bestowed to Colin Kaepernick. Because if it wasn't
Mm.
for Kaepernick making it kneeling before it became the hot item, before the Senate decided to do it behind Nancy Pelosi, and I remember people, even our own, were saying, well, they're going to forget all about him. He's not going to get paid. He's not going to get this, that, and the other. Like he's going to be an afterthought. This man is going to be revered by history, without ever playing another down of football. And he's that much more revered now. And I think a presidential award, I'm just calling into existence. I believe it's inevitable, considering the type of year that we just came out of 2020, that is
Yeah.
bestowed to Colin Kaepernick for what the courage that he showed. Yes. And then when we do that with him,
Mm.
there was a fellow before him whom I met a couple of years ago at the mosque, prayed with him, and he gave a talk. His name was Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, and he was an NBA player who refused to stand for the anthem in 1995,
Mm.
96. And then he was suspended for every game. And he was eventually blackballed from the NBA.
Mm.
And then and there was a fella, Craig Hodges, who used to play for the Bulls, won championships with Jordan, who was also blackballed from the NBA in the prime of his career for taking stands of social justice.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
now the NBA's platform sits on the bedrock of social justice.
Right.
Its popularity sits on the bedrock of social justice. Now
Mhm.
that you have a progressive upper front offices throughout the league who like are now like looking and shaming people, who take these conservative stances, like a Donald Sterling who used to own the Clippers, and like the Kelly Loeffler who owned the Atlanta Dream of the WNBA, and her own players voted for Raphael Warnock to supplant her. And so now, I think, in the light of all of these victories, that these beautiful souls, these Colin Kaepernicks, the Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, these Craig Hodges, these gentlemen should not be forgotten in the annals of our history, where we had it wrong when they actually had it right 25, 30 years ahead of our time. So now that we
Mhm.
just caught up to where they are, we need to restore them and put some respect on their names.
I like it. Maybe we just started something here now and we can start our own. They have those petition sites where, you can start a petition and
Absolutely.
get signatures and,
Yeah,
hopefully.
I'm all for that. I met Mahmoud. He's a beautiful brother. I mean, he's so
Yeah.
humble and so nice. I said, man, you don't understand. It's like I wasn't even born when Ali took his stand. So when he took his stand, I was 20 years old. Not even.
Mm.
And so that was our version of Ali. He took a stand, with a Muslim
Mhm.
name. And I was
Yeah.
aspiring to be even evolve in the best of practicing of Islam as I could at that time, based on my understanding. So I can underscore it to him even better how much that I have for him, how much admiration I have for him. And I want
Mm.
these gentlemen to get their flowers while they're still here.
Yeah. That's great. Oh, so Reverend Mike, I think you're muted.
Is he?
It doesn't look like it, but I can't hear him. I see his lips moving.
Am I muted now?
Oh, that's better. We can hear you.
So I was just going to say, share this talk, anyone who's listening, and we'll start a movement. Or,
Yeah.
Absolutely. If
or
it's, if it's gonna if it's gonna be cool to be for social justice, let's take care of the martyrs who made it this day
yeah,
possible.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
and those
right.
whose careers have been martyred, not just their lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
That's what I would like to make that full circle.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. Cool. Well, we're coming up on an hour. Reverend Mike, do you want to tie a nice spiritual bow on everything at the closing?
I just, the moment is not lost on me, the inauguration. The other thing that hit me is, there's a woman in line to be president now.
Yes.
Right.
There's a second gentleman in the White House as well.
Yeah. I mean,
That first term.
There's a lot of firsts. I'm going to allow myself to stay focused on a couple of positives. There's never been an election where more Americans voted.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
That I do think that we are ripe for a spiritual renewal in our country as we emerge out of COVID, and that I think this renewal and this an examination of conscience that goes with it will in fact help cultivate the minds and soften the hearts to lay the groundwork for work that's probably going to take a generation to complete, but that we can start that commitment now. And
yeah, and any child right now who saw today's inauguration, they even said it. I think Amy Klobuchar said it, that any little boys and girls looking up at the stage can see themselves somewhere on that stage.
Well, and just in my lifetime, right? Just seeing women all over the place, right? So I remember when Geraldine Ferraro ran, but that was kind of a felt like they were pandering to the women vote.
Okay.
And this felt like, well, I suppose because the primary had so many talented women. I don't know. It's just been an exceptional year. I think COVID has really opened our eyes to some things. I mean, I don't think BLM would have been as impactful without everyone being stuck at home. And so now it's just up to us, and particularly up to guys who look like me, to help move the ball forward. And so grab your walkers, everyone, and let's go.
And in football analogy, let our pursuit of liberty for all and our defense of liberty for all get a 3 and out, against this assault against it. So if they get a 3 and out against them, make them throw the Hail Mary, just play the solid defense, and we'll be all right.
Yes. Okay, I don't get football analogies, but before we go, I do want to mention that the poet who spoke during the inauguration, Amanda Gorman, is from Los Angeles. She's from West L.A. And
that's my high school. I went to high school with her older cousin.
See, there's a connection.
Absolutely.
So, and there are articles about her all over the place. She went to Harvard. And Oprah has been championing her as well. So I hope we have a lot more to hear from her, because
absolutely,
I think poetry is such a perfect way to marry ideals and spirituality and heart and emotion. And I think she did a great job.
It's secular scripture.
Yes.
Yeah, she channeled her Nikki Giovanni. Yeah, she did.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. Another thing that Salaam says that I have to look
up. More homework. Thanks, Salaam.
Yes. Well, thank you.
You won't be disappointed when you look up Nikki Giovanni, folks.
Okay. I've written it down. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Salaam and Reverend Mike. And join us next time. Tell your friends. Help us get this petition started and out, and celebrate brave people who are stepping forth and speaking the truth and leading the way.
Spend your stimulus checks wisely now.
There you go. All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye,
Adios.
everybody.